Alright, let me be upfront about something right out of the gate. When 40% of you selected the Angel of Decay for this deep dive in Community Poll 339, I fully expected this to be a nice short one. An obscure monster, a couple of additions, a cool name, 20 minutes, start to finish. That was the plan anyway, because this is not a 20-minute lore profile. Even the prologue I wrote refused to remain simple. What began as a short introduction to this video grew into its own 17-minute standalone story lore video, which I've already published and that you will find linked in the show notes and at the very end of this video. Still, I must admit, this is one of those lore expeditions that I especially enjoy making, because the Angel of Decay is not a monster that receives very much attention, and a good portion of the lore uncovered was new to me as well. It appeared briefly across 2 editions, gathered some contradictory lore around itself, and then quietly disappeared. Not killed off, not retconned, no dramatic send-off. It is just MIA, along with everything it stood guard over, and the modern lore has never said a word about it. The Angel of Decay is one of the stranger little contradictions across the Dungeons & Dragons bestiaries, and most people who've heard of it have it completely wrong, which is understandable because the lore itself couldn't agree on what it was. 3 books, 3 origins, and then vanished without a trace. Well, today we fix that, and it all begins in Vanrakdoom, with 2 servants of Selune who suffered something far worse than death. Deep beneath Waterdeep, in the unholy temple of Vanrakdoom, 2 servants bound in Undeath stand sentinel, eternal guardians of the desecrated tomb of Gorothir, one of the most vile of the Dark Lady's prophets. They were once shards of selune, celestial beings entrusted with delivering the hope and light of the Moon Maiden's grace into the darkest reaches of the mortal world. Then Shar corrupted them, extinguished their radiance, and compelled them to protect the very evil they had once opposed. They became Angels of Decay. And that tragic tale, the grim details of which I recounted in a prologue story to this deep dive, should be the sole genesis of these undead monstrosities. Yet it is not. The lore offers 3 distinct origins for one obscure form of undeath, a nameless phenomena of decomposition, a corrupted angelic servant, and an abyssal birth. And then, just as the lore began to unravel its mysteries, the Angel of Decay disappeared from the record of modern bestiaries and lore. So, what was the Angel of Decay? When the books stopped chronicling their rot, did they simply vanish with the words? Or are they still out there, only forgotten by scholarly writings of the 5th edition texts? To answer that, we first need to strip away the false promise contained in their name, because these winged horrors of undeath are neither graceful nor divine. They are something far worse, masked in only the impious mockery of the heavens. Most undead creatures are built around fears we understand. A lich is ambition that refused to die with the failing body that carried it. A ghost remains trapped by a place, memory, or an injustice it simply cannot release. And the charismatic vampire can romance, dress in opulence, and pretend to be civilized, but the fangs eventually erase any doubt. However, the Angel of Decay is one of those monsters whose name seems to tell you almost everything you need to know, and yet still manages to send you down a path of wrong conclusions. The name alone certainly creates an understandable misconception. An Angel of Decay sounds like a fallen angel, perhaps a once radiant celestial servant dragged into undeath. It is an understandable, even obvious conclusion. But when this creature first arrived in the 3rd edition lore, it was not introduced as a fallen celestial. Far from it. Yes, it has wings, and maybe if you are far enough away in poor lighting and have terrible eyesight, this vile abomination may hold the rough shape of an angel. But this creature is, by any measure, a false angel. And for an evil with such a strong identity, its published history is surprisingly brief. On the pages of 2004's Libris Mortis Book of the Dead, we are given the creature's earliest history and lore, explicitly telling us that any resemblance to an actual angel is purely accidental. What was confirmed was an intimidating undead with no confirmed origin of higher power or even practiced recipe of the dark arts, framing their existence as unknown or unexplained rather than the result of any specific divine act, evil summoning, or villainous ritual. Over the years, the lore expanded to make the creature's history deeper, but in doing so added complications that we must explore. Across the lore of the 3rd and 4th edition text, the Angel of Decay has been described through 3 origins: a horror born of necrotic phenomena, a celestial servant corrupted by a dark goddess, and a deliberate insult to the 7 heavens created within the chaos of the Abyss's 113th layer. Not only does this invite examination into the veracity and evolution of each account, but it also leaves us with 2 important questions that the published lore never really reconciles and the modern lore has completely ignored. Are these various origins a form of evolution, or are they each separate paths to the same end in Undeath? And then we must ask, what happened to them? We will answer these questions and a lot more, but before we get there, we need to determine what the Angel of Decay actually is, because the creature is far stranger than the already misleading name alone suggests. Fellow scholars, a brief pause so that I may share a stat and ask for your help in reversing a trend. Did you know that only about 15% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed? These are tough, unpredictable times on the platform, especially for independent creators dedicated to long-form content. We are firmly in an era where the algorithm favors hyper-fast, bite-sized, and low-effort shorts. I love digging through 50 years of source books to create comprehensive documentary-style lore videos. However, these take weeks to produce, and more importantly, it is becoming much harder for long-form lore to stay visible. So if you enjoy this content, find any value in my work, or just want to help ensure that this free space for well-researched formats remains visible, then take a second and subscribe, not just to my channel, but across creators of all long-form genres that you find interesting. It really costs you nothing, helps prove that there is still a place for deep dives, and is an easy way to keep YouTube from becoming just another TikTok. Your support means a lot, so thank you for listening. Now, let's get back to the lore. When Libris Mortis, one of 3rd edition's major sourcebooks on the dead, introduced the Angel of Decay, it was presented as a truly unique creature of undeath and decomposition. The Angel of Decay stands roughly 9 feet tall and weighs somewhere between 500 and 700 pounds. It is broadly human-like, but the proportions are heavy, misshapen, and certainly intimidating. Closer to an ogre with wings than anything one could consider lithe or angelic. The wings are rotting, the flesh hangs loose, and the stench of decay is overwhelming. But do not let its inelegant and rotting form fool you. The Angel of Decay holds a genius level of intelligence that rivals the wisest arcane wizard. It can observe, reason, remember, lead, and understand strategy. It speaks both common and abyssal, which means it can converse with mortals as readily as it could bargain with demons or receive orders from the powers of the lower planes. This is an important characteristic as it explains how the Angel of Decay could serve as a guardian in Vanrakdoom, a commander in Thay, or lead an army of undead under the command of a demon lord or a ghoulish king. It most certainly might look like a body losing its struggle against putrefaction, but the mind inside remains sharp enough to understand exactly the horror it is about to inflict. The biology of the Angel of Decay revolves around decomposition and the creature's empowerment in Undeath through the negative energy released in that process. When healthy tissue dies and begins to dissolve, the 3rd edition lore describes an indefinable essence that drifts toward the creature. This decay of the organic radiates a form of essential negative energy that the Angel of Decay is able to extract and utilize. This gives the creature's otherwise vile form a more regal disposition than many undead. It has no need to savagely kneel over a corpse to feed. The diffusion of life and suffusion of its essence through the Angel of Decay's rotting aura does all the work. And this unique conversion of living matter is clearly illustrated visually, giving it the alternative name as the Harbinger of Rot. Whenever the winged creature stands on the ground, streams of necrotizing corruption drip from its silhouette, pooling at the base of its towering form and spreading across the surrounding area. Anyone caught in this aura of putrid black slurry will instantly feel its healthy, living flesh begin to lose cohesion. The skin softens and turns black as organic muscle, tendon, and fat give way to liquefaction. The pain and sickness begin immediately and become impossible to separate as the body begins the work of dying before death actually arrives to claim the unfortunate. This grim life cycle is what makes the Angel of Decay such a horror to encounter. Every living creature harmed in its aura serves the gruesome undead towering above you. The more bodies afflicted by its rot through aura or direct strikes, the harder the creature becomes to destroy. But this grisly form of renewal comes with a cost that explains why the winged monstrosity, an undead perfectly capable of flying, almost exclusively prefers to fight on solid ground, losing any combat advantage of flight reserved primarily for travel and escape. Not only does the Angel of Decay possess no innate ranged attacks, its combat profile focusing almost exclusively on melee engagement through its claws and wing attacks, but its rotting aura is only active when the creature is grounded, letting its own decomposition create the necrotizing pools it uses for renewal. It must be noted here, for the sake of accuracy, that the 4th edition lore did address this ranged weakness when it introduced the Rot Slinger. This variant to the Rot Harbinger, 4th edition's name for the Angel of Decay, is able to hurl, and I'm quoting now, feculent globs of decaying matter that deal necrotic damage and also weaken their target. But this is a rare outlier to the standard 4E creature and completely anathema to the 3rd edition lore. Before we move on, there is one final biological note that any adventurer who might encounter such an undead should appreciate. Most predatory undead survive through some recognizable act of consumption. Vampires drink blood, ghouls eat flesh, wraiths draw life from the living. Each is a necessary act of survival in order to sustain its unlife. Even some liches across the editions of lore have required various forms of feeding, be it continued souls or negative energy. However, the Angel of Decay is unlike its undead cousins in this respect. The lore does tell us the Angel of Decay is in a constant state of decomposition and renewal. In fact, it is the creature's own continually dissolving flesh that creates the corrupting liquid of filth that pools beneath it, fueling its aura. This might lead one to plausibly believe that the Angel of Decay uses its aura as a survival mechanism, with the creature weakening until it feeds like many undead. But making this assumption would be a grave mistake, if you'll excuse the pun. The key is in the very deliberate text of Libris Mortis, with its ever-decomposing form described as constantly regenerating and renewing. The lore explicitly stating that the Angel of Decay requires no feeding or diet of any kind to survive, in effect making its aura of rot both an offensive form of attack and defensive means to heal itself, but not a mechanic of sustenance or feeding. In this way, you can biologically think of the Angel of Decay more along the lines of an animated skeleton, mummy lord, or death knight than, say, a vampire or ghoul. These unique distinctions give the Angel of Decay a clear and coherent identity. Its appearance, its behavior, and its powers all come back to the same core theme of decomposition. However, what Libris Mortis never explains is where any of this actually started. no creator or creation method is identified, and the lore gives us no propagation of its undeath, no equivalent of a vampire's bite or a wraith's spawn. This false angel of undeath just seems to enter the bestiary record as one-off creatures with no heritage or traceable bloodline. This leaves us with the most plausible in-universe conclusion to draw, being that scholars of that era understood what it was, but they could not yet tell us who had created the first one, or even whether anyone had. The original interpretation of the Angel of Decay's genesis as told in those early 3rd edition texts left a lot of questions. The lore simply presented a winged horror of undeath associated with the rot of the living, positioned as some form of unexplained phenomena. While certainly vague, this was at least supported by the lore also offering no divinity or dark power behind its birth. There was no known betrayal, punishment, or ritual such as lichdom by which an evil practitioner could produce or even become one. The first real challenge and clarity to this obscurity arrived in a web enhancement for the Champions of Ruin 3rd edition sourcebook. It was called Vanrakdoom. Vanrakdoom is probably most recognizable to 5th edition lore scholars who have familiarity with the Dungeon of the Mad Mage adventure as level 18 of that mega dungeon located in Undermountain beneath Waterdeep. And the entirety of the prologue story that I released in advance of this deep dive was built from that canonical 3E lore. Vanrakdoom is an Undermountain temple, originally created by dwarves of Clan Malerkin sometime before 1104, long before, although the exact date is unknown. Its granite and iron halls and burial crypts were constructed to honor past dwarven kings, and the entire complex was dedicated to the mighty Allfather and greater dwarven deity Moradin, the Soul Forger. Eventually the dwarves were driven out by Drow and Duergar invaders, and for a time the site fell into a cycle of occupation by various powers of the realms below, or more clearly said, the Underdark. Centuries later, the dwarven site would be discovered, claimed, and dedicated to the dark goddess Shar as the temple Vanrakdoom in 1130 by Lord Vanrak Moonstar. Vanrak was a Waterdavian explorer and noble born into an historically loyal Selunite bloodline, who was revealed as a traitor to the High House of Stars and his family, betraying the worship of Selune in favor of the Dark Lady of Loss. Vanrakdoom and its evil namesake both have some great lore that belongs in another dedicated discussion, but one further detail does matter here. Deep within Vanrakdoom lies the Crypt of Gorothir, where the lore gives us another origin for the Angel of Decay, telling us that Shar has on rare occasion corrupted angelic shards of Selune into the winged undead. Vanrakdoom adventure lore confirms that at least some of these decomposing horrors had, in fact, once been genuine celestials. This, of course, does not fit comfortably beside the lore of Libris Mortis, and in fact flies in direct conflict to the earlier 3E lore that told us any resemblance to actual heavenly angels was purely by happenstance. The Vanrakdoom lore is only slightly less vague, never explaining or even providing hints as to how the Dark Goddess achieved such a transformation. Then again, she is a greater deity, so anything is possible, and she owes us nothing. Even with those gaps, however, the implication is clear. Shar could take one of Selune's angelic planetar servants, corrupt it into an undeath Angel of Decay, and then place it into her service, as she did in the Crypt of Gorothir. There is one final detail of the Vanrakdoom lore we must discuss. Given almost in passing, it would be easy to overlook. However, to the story writer and world builder in me, it is both the most critical aspect of the 3E lore, adding a whole new level of tragedy, and perhaps introduces something less than divine into the lore of the lunar goddess Selune. The canon takes an almost oh-well disposition in confirming that the two lost shards of Selune were simply replaced. This leads to several plausible conclusions that amplify the tragedy of their corruption. The fact that they have been replaced among the 7 indicates that Selune was well aware of their loss, and with no lore of her direct intervention, this supports the claim that the good-aligned goddess did little in the way of rescue before simply moving on. The abandonment of what are described as her most faithful really goes to highlight the celestial office they held being more vital than any specific individuals who fell, no matter how cruel or tragic that might seem. This facet of the lore turns the lost shards into nothing more than pawns of the most enduring sibling rivalry in all of Dungeons & Dragons lore. While this is of course speculation, in closing out the 3E Genesis, I do think it is more than plausible to assume that this origin of Shar's corrupting shadow was never meant to be the sole origin story for the rare and obscure Angels of Decay. Regardless, the Vanrakdoom lore expanded the accounts of early scholars who described an undead creature that looked vaguely angelic. While the 3rd edition accounts have thus far not fully solved the question of origin, the clergy of Selune have certainly validated beyond any doubt that at least 2 Angels of Decay really had, in fact, been celestial beings. The best and really only significant and named example of an Angel of Decay in the lore appears at the tail end of the 3rd edition era and is found in the 2007 novel Unclean, the opening book of the Haunted Lands trilogy. Her name was Shex, and she served as a field commander in an undead army led by an undead night haunt from the Plane of Shadow named Ysval in 1375 Dale Reckoning. That army was part of the infamous Lich Zastam's wider campaign to conquer all of Thay. Its forces were assembled through an undead manufactory overseen by Zingax, a grotesque but highly capable necromancer who treated the creation of undead as his own personal field of experimentation. Common zombies and similar creatures were easy work by his standards. Intelligent undead, however, required greater skill, more focused dark magic, and a willingness to learn through failure. Zingax claimed that he could create forms of undeath believed lost and even breed new variant types. That makes it tempting to assume Zingax might have created the named Angel of Decay, which would only add to the creature's origin mythos. The text does establish several connections between Zingax and Shex. However, the Unclean lore is careful to provide no validation of such claims, while still leaving any speculation firmly in the realm of plausible but unconfirmed. What the novel does confirm is her elevated rank and status. Shex was not just a member of that undead horde, she was one of Ysval's officers, capable of command and trusted with a role in Zastam's invasion of Thay. Shex was well suited for the role, and Ysval appears to have regarded her as something closer to a peer than any form of disposable undead. The historical record for Shex would end when the Thayan counterattack reached a notable battle in the southeastern region of Thay that would take place in a fortification east of the Thazarim River, called Thazar Keep. There, the Angel of Decay would face off against a ghost paladin by the name of Mirror, known to travel with a bard named Bareris Anskull. This apparition was once a brave and accomplished swordsman who had long forgotten his own name and face. The lore tells us that the Ghost Paladin engaged the leprous Shex in the streets of the keep, noting that the Angel of Decay was, and I quote again, ravaging men and horses with her talons. In that confrontation, Shex was slain and her corpse liquefied when the story lore states that Mirror drove his shadowy blade deep into her cantankerous torso. The destruction of Shex is a significant event in Realms lore, helping bring an end to Ysval's command as well as Zastam's campaign for absolute control of Thay. Shex, as written, offers some interesting new depth to the Angel of Decay, but the accounts in the lore of Unclean once again offer no clarity as to how the undead creature came to be. Shex enters the novel already formed, returning us in many respects to the initial mystery left by Libris Mortis and its vague overtures of the unexplained. We know what an Angel of Decay does, and we have been given examples of its leadership and intelligence, but we still do not know its true genesis. However, as the era of 3rd edition comes to a close, the scholars of the 4th edition would hold the answers we seek, and all we have to do to acquire this knowledge is descend into the infinite chaos of the Abyss. Fourth edition would finally reveal what many accept as the most canonical and, in my opinion, most plausible origin story for the Angels of Decay, which may surprise those of you that know my lore struggles with the writings of 4th edition. Nonetheless, the 4E texts of Monster Manual 1 give the Angel of Decay its best creation mythos, laying out the role Orcus, the demon prince of Undeath, played in creating the bulk of these winged undead, and validating that, this time, the connection to the heavens was quite deliberate. Of course, it would not be 4th edition lore if they did not add their own retcon stamp along the way, reintroducing the creature as the Rot Harbinger, while making clear that this was in fact a reworking of the Angel of Decay lore, its history now centered on Thanatos, the 113th layer of the Abyss. According to the brief but expanded lore, the gods once sent a host or battalion of actual haloed and divine angels from the 7 heavens of Mount Celestia in order to kill Orcus while he was traveling outside the Abyss and the lower planes, perhaps believing that distance from his own realm would leave him vulnerable. They were wrong. Orcus killed every angel sent against him. Enraged at the insolence of such an act, when the demon prince returned to the Abyss, he set out to create the Angels of Decay, aka Rot Harbingers, as mockeries of the very celestials he had defeated, then sent them into the natural world to ravage all that good-aligned gods had created, meaning mortals once again pay the price for the hubris of divine theocracy. 4th edition was always thin on details, so we're not told much more. The lore does not determine if Orcus raised each angel's corpse, corrupting each in Undeath, which would limit their number, explaining their rarity, or whether he just used them as a blueprint for an entirely new form of Undead. The former theory could be supported in the knowledge that for Orcus, victory has always been satisfying when his enemy's purpose or faith can be turned and used against them. The gods sent angels to stop the demon prince of Undeath. His answer was to create Undead that carried an angelic parody while spreading Undeath in his name, so the lore, while sparse, is quite fitting here. We are told that while many Angels of Decay continue to serve Orcus and his followers such as the Ghoul King Dorsane, others still manage to escape his control. This invasion of servitude to Orcus allows that at least within the 4E origin, the Angel of Decay is not limited to the role of obedient servant or thrall, that once created, it could become an independent threat with motives of its own, something that may or may not have been the case with previous incarnations. That's all up to interpretation. So we have varied origins, written at different points across history, something that is hardly unusual. However, while these accounts do not always line up cleanly, they do offer some truly fascinating lore. But to clarify and settle these claims, we need to separate what the sources confirm from the explanation we build between them. Perhaps the contradiction is not found in the answers, but in the question. We end our studies of the 3rd and 4th edition and begin our analysis of its lore left with 3 points of evolution for the Angel of Decay, or if you are so inclined as I am, 3 stages of discovery. And I'm going to now make the case that each is valid, even canonical. The earliest lore, if taken from an in-universe and mortal viewpoint, chronicled the emergence of a new type of undead, unable to offer anything more than speculation as to its beginning. Tales of Vanrakdoom prove that at least one deity was able to create these undead from actual angels. And the 4E lore finally and fittingly identifies a demon lord prince of Undeath in Orcus as the creator of what can plausibly be estimated to be the vast majority of these specialized undead. This presents the cleanest way to reconcile, even coalesce the lore without requiring one to erase the other, treating the Angel of Decay as a single form of Undeath, first as a discovery to be found by mortals, then reached through more than one method. The lore never offered a coalesced final origin, but I don't think it needed to. The Angel of Decay is an undead creature whose history grew as scholars of each era discovered new ways to explain it. For once, that uncertainty actually helps with the lore rather than damaging it. And that leaves us with one final question. Where did they go? Despite any reconciliation of origins, there is one undisputable fact we must now confront. After 4th edition, the Angel of Decay disappears from the official bestiaries. No updated history or retcon lore, no account of a final battle or apocalyptic event that destroyed the last of their kind. But there is one place in particular that presents the most puzzling facet of this vanishing, and that is found in 5th edition's return to Vanrakdoom, where 2 noteworthy Angels of Decay were known to stand sentinel, now removed along with any trace of what they once guarded. The Crypt of Gorothir, and the subject of both One Origin and my expanded story prologue, was one of the most significant and sacred sites of the Church of Shar. Lord Vanrak Moonstar had recovered the shattered bones of an ancient dark prophet of the night and placed them inside a black marble sarcophagus. Shar restored Gorothir's broken shadow staff, which rested among his remains. This 3rd edition adventure lore was the complete expression of Sharon victory. A prophet of Shar rested above a stolen and defaced Selunite altar, protected by 2 of Selune's own angelic servants, now corrupted into Undeath. The Shadow Staff, the plinth stone and tarnished silver altar, the tomb and its guardians. They were the cohesive and canonical lore that made the Vanrakdoom Crypt one of the most significant if profane places in Undermountain. Enter Waterdeep, Dungeon of the Mad Mage for 5th edition, which returned to Vanrakdoom more than 3 centuries later. Vanrak was dead. Caresta Delving Stone ruled what remained of his cult. Parts of Vanrakdoom slipped in and out of the Shadowfell as the corrupted dragon Umbraxakar remained trapped within his despair. But Gorothir, his tomb and the legendary Shadowstaff, they are nowhere to be found, and the 2 angels that guarded him? They've disappeared as well, vanished without a single reference, almost as though they never existed. 5th edition gives us no scene in which the crypt collapses. It never tells us the adventurers defeated its guardians, that Selune reclaimed her fallen servants, or that Shar removed the remains of her prophet. No account describes the destruction of the Shadow Staff or the recovery of the ancient altar beneath it. The 5e adventurer simply omits it, all of it. So, what happened? In universe, several explanations are possible. Across Realms lore, Undermountain has historically seen more changes than most any other dungeon. Halaster Blackcloak closes routes, opens new ones, hides passages, and rearranges layouts according to motivation and designs that make sense only to him. The 5th edition incarnation of Vanrakdoom, level 18 of the Mega Dungeon, already contains sections that shift into the Shadowfell. So, plausibly, the Crypt of Gorothir could have been sealed behind a hidden passage, sent to some isolated reach of the Shadowfell, or buried during magical upheavals that passed through Undermountain across the Spell Plague and the Second Sundering. Shar may have even reclaimed the remains of her prophet and the restored artifact, removing both before Halaster or another invading company could take possession. Each explanation offers some level of plausibility, but to be clear, none are found in the recorded history. Stepping out of universe from a meta-narrative, the answer is likely far less mysterious. The 5th edition version of Vanrakdoom was not a direct conversion of the 3e adventure. It was a new presentation, built around Vanrak's fall and repentance, Caresta's diminished cult, and the possible redemption of the shadow dragon Umbraxakar. The focus changed, and much of the older complex and its lore changed with it. And perhaps most relevant, restoring Gorothir's crypt would have required the adventure to address the Shadow Staff. In 3rd edition, the Unholy Staff was a major artifact of Shar's Church and one of the principal objectives around which an entire high-level adventure could be built. Its presence in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage would create an immediate expectation that adventurers could recover an artifact of world-changing power. This would likely require 5e designers to retcon and convert the artifact, limit its use, or otherwise explain why characters could enter Gorothir's crypt but never claim the most important object inside it. Simply put, removing the crypt avoided a lot of problems, all at once, including the need to create 5th edition stat blocks for the 2 Angels of Decay guarding it. But all of this remains speculation, built from the structure of the canonical publications and not any confirmed statement of intent. So, is the Angel of Decay extinct or simply forgotten? I will offer the words of the legendary Carl Sagan, or Martin Rees if you want to be pedantic about it. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And for the Angels of Decay, omission is not the same thing as destruction or extinction. The 5th edition gaps tell us nothing definite about the creature's fate other than its lore and stat blocks have not been updated. A bestiary does not provide a census of every creature still alive or undead within this setting, so I don't think it's a stretch to state that a monster can vanish from the new books without being declared extinct, unless said books explicitly say as much. And to that end, there is no modern lore that records such a species-wide destruction. My humble advice is to treat the silence of 5th edition as selective publishing, not as an epitaph. One of the most beautiful aspects of the Dungeons & Dragons lore is that only you and your table get to decide what is canonical. But if you need canon, then consider this. Orcus still hates the gods. Shar will always seek to darken Selune's light. And Decay? Well, Decay has never waited for a new edition.